to That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to That Kevin Show. Very glad to have you with us, per usual, and very glad to check in here towards the beginning of the year, though it is late into the second month, with Dr. Joel Veldkamp, who was with us at the end of last year, kind of wrapping up the report on persecution globally. He is part of the work of Christian Solidarity International, and we are very honored to have him back. Joel, welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm honored to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about, before we go to the two new stories we have, what's the very latest with what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh? We talked about it so much in 2023, and I know that there are some people that, even from The Chosen, the TV show, that have wanted to do something about this. Are the relief efforts still underway? What's the latest?
Yeah, relief efforts are still underway for the 100,000 Armenian Christians who were forced to flee their homeland.
Displaced.
In September. Yep. So Nagorno-Karabakh has been conquered by the dictatorship of Azerbaijan. Basically, no one lives there now. Every once in a while, the president of Azerbaijan will go there for a photo op, and he'll have himself photographed strolling through streets that are completely empty with gigantic Azerbaijani flags hanging over what used to be the fourth biggest Armenian city in the world.
Wow.
So the entire population is displaced in the Republic of Armenia. Of course, it's extremely difficult to be a displaced person. It's winter time. Many people don't live in good houses or in finished buildings, and it's difficult to find work. It's difficult, just to deal with the aftermath of the war. There were hundreds of young men who were burned terribly when a fuel depot exploded in the last days of the evacuation of the population, and their struggle will continue for years. So CSI is still there. We're still working with our partners to help people who were wounded in the evacuation, to help people who have ongoing medical needs, and also to help people build new lives in exile. But it is quite grim. There doesn't seem to be any international will to help these people go home, to hold Azerbaijan accountable for this act of essentially genocide. So yeah, it's a dark time.
Well, this has become a theme of the current administration. The whole world's going to hell in a handbasket, as best I can tell, and Washington doesn't really seem to care. And the religious persecution element of that is always the one that gets it the worst, because it seems to be the last in priority in terms of what any government wishes to focus on. And primarily, it's usually economically driven as to what they're doing, though even with that, I can't understand why we're involved in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. On a lesser degree, I do understand the Israeli-Hamas thing a little bit more, but it's a world of turmoil and upheaval right now, and I fear that the most important work that CSI has in front of it is still to come in the days ahead. Let's talk about a couple of other stories that may not be well known, but there's a gentleman in Pakistan by the name of Noman. What should we know about his situation?
Noman is a 23-year-old Christian man from Pakistan who's been sentenced to death for blasphemy against Islam. In Pakistan, a variety of perceived offenses against the Prophet Muhammad or the Quran or Islam are punishable by long prison sentences or even death. And this has basically become a weapon of terror against the tiny Christian minority in Pakistan.
So let's talk about the story. How did he get entrapped? What was he doing? Was he just minding his own business and taken off the street? What happened here?
Yeah, about 4 years ago, the police came to his house at night and arrested him and said that there's been a complaint filed against you that you were distributing nasty cartoons about the Prophet Muhammad. No one has ever seen these cartoons. No one has ever produced evidence that he was actually doing this. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, the accusation itself is often enough to upend a person's life like this.
Wow. That's a lot of trust in the person making the accusation.
Well, it's a lot of terror at what could happen to you if you're the person to let someone who's accused of blasphemy go, right? Then maybe you're blasphemous. Maybe you're the infidel if you're not caring about the honor of Islam. So that's kind of how it functions in Pakistan. So Noman has been in jail for the past 4 years. it was farcical. He was put on trial for this crime in 2 different jurisdictions in Pakistan. So 2 different court cases were going on at the same time. One of them just actually on Monday found him completely innocent and dropped the case against him, but the other one has condemned him to death. So that his appeal is
Looking at the same witnesses, dealing with the same body of evidence?
Or the same lack of evidence, the same lack of witnesses. Yeah. It's there's not much justice to be found right here at the moment.
So he's been in jail for 4 years. That's already a pretty extended sentence for, even if he had distributed some cartoons, but that's a pretty harsh punishment for such a thing. I'm taking his word for it that he did not do it. He is a Christian. This is expressly Christian persecution that's being carried out against him.
Christians tend to be targeted by this sort of accusation more often because, there's no law in Pakistan that says if you make fun of Jesus, you go to jail for a few years, right? It's all about Islam. And who are the people who are most often suspected and easier to accuse of blaspheming against Islam? It's typically Christians. Christians are about 2% of the population in Pakistan, but about 50% of the people who are accused of blasphemy in a serious way. So typically, this is a way of settling scores. This is a way of taking people's
Were there
life.
skirmishes between he and different members of the Islamic community? Why did they pick him out of the blue? What was there? Was there a grudge that didn't get forgiven? What happened?
The maddening thing is that we don't know. He doesn't know. Like, imagine sitting in prison for 4 years, trying to rack your brains, trying to think of what was it that triggered somebody to make this accusation against you. And once the accusation was made, it couldn't be unmade. He and his cousin said, we kind of got into a scrap at a football game a few nights before with some people we didn't know. And after that, then came the accusation and the arrest. That could have been it. It could have been something completely different. It could have been a crazy person. It's just, it's a maddening situation.
It's a very different scenario than what we experience in the West, where when an accusation is brought, normally, there has to be a body of evidence that goes with that, eyewitnesses, photographic, other types of data that may be produced to support the narrative. In this situation, and it seems like more broadly across Pakistan, none of that is required, friends. And that is why there is the power in existence to take Christians and to push them through these excruciating circumstances. And that's why CSI is doing what they can to help the Christians that find themselves in this situation. Real quickly, before we go to the break, Joel, what is CSI able to do for him at present, and what have you been involved doing?
We've been supporting his legal team, and we've also been supporting his family financially. It's quite a heavy financial burden because the family actually has to pay for his quote unquote jail expenses, like the cost of keeping him alive in jail. That cost falls on the family. So we're able to help with some of that. We're able to help with some of the other expenses. They go to see him once a week. They can't be in the same room with him. They can talk to him through a chain link fence so they can touch his fingers, but that's about it.
And when we come back, another gentleman is under some degree of persecution. CSI is keeping their eye on us.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.